And right away, we hit our first major conflict. The rule clearly states that weeping for anyone but Hussain is disliked. But then you look at the historical records, and they're just as clear. The Prophet himself wept openly for his son Ibrahim and for his uncle Hamza. This creates a direct contradiction, right? If the narration's universal rule is true, are we then forced to conclude that the Prophet himself performed a disliked act? You just can't hold both of those ideas as true without creating a really serious theological problem.
The absolute key to this first step is the Arabic word kul. You see, in Islamic legal thought, this isn't just a casual word like most or a lot of the time. The argument we're looking at really hinges on this. Kul means a universal, all-encompassing rule. It is one of the strongest words for all you can possibly use. So let's connect the dots. If we take that word kul at its full heavyweight meaning, then this narration is creating a very clear-cut rule. It means any and all weeping for anyone other than Hussain falls into the religious category of makruh, which is a disliked or discouraged act. This is the foundation the whole argument is built on. Okay, so now that the rule has been established from the narration, the analysis starts to, stress test it. And where's the first place it looks for comparison? It puts it right up against the Quran itself. This verse is absolutely central to the argument. It describes the state of being jazwa, which means impatient or full of grief, as a fundamental part of the human condition, the kind of anxiety we feel when things go wrong. The analysis points out that the Quran seems to frame this as just an inherent human trait, and not necessarily a positive one. And that word, jaz, that's the kicker. It's the exact same term used back in our original narration. It carries this specific idea of being excessive, of losing composure. Really, the total opposite of sabr, or patience, which, as you know, is a virtue that's praised over and over again. So when you put them side by side like this, the potential conflict really pops. The argument is that the very act the narration makes a special exception for, this jaza, is the same act the Quran seems to describe in a less than favorable light, especially when compared to the virtue of patience. And this leads us to the third part of the analysis, and honestly, this is probably the most critical test of all. How does the rule from that narration stack up against the recorded actions of the Prophet Muhammad himself? Now, the argument brings up these really well-known foundational stories from the Prophet's life. Accounts tell us he openly wept when his baby son Ibrahim passed away, and that he grieved so deeply for his uncle Hamza after the Battle of Uhud. These stories they're cornerstones of his humanity. And right here, this is where the argument presents its central tension. If all grief for others is disliked, but the Prophet himself openly grieved for his son and his uncle, then the logical conclusion is that the Prophet took part in a disliked act. And that, right there, is a really profound and challenging implication. So you've got this major problem, this tension. How does the argument resolve it? Well, this final step weaves all those threads together into one single, very pointed theological dilemma. To really get this final step, we have to talk about the concept of isma, or infallibility. This is a core, bedrock doctrine in Islamic thought. The idea is that prophets are divinely protected by God from committing sins or making errors in their religious duties. It's fundamental to the understanding of a prophet's character. Okay, so let's just walk through this logical train one more time, because it's laid out so clearly here. 1. The narration sets a universal rule. 2. The prophet's recorded actions appear to break that rule. 3. The implication then is that he did something disliked. And 4. That final implication crashes directly into the core doctrine of isma. You can see how one point just leads straight to the next, creating this really sharp dilemma. And so here we are at the argument's final conclusion. It basically says that you can't logically hold both of these things to be true at the same time, the literal universal interpretation of this narration and the traditional doctrine of prophetic infallibility. According to this analysis, you're forced to choose between them. In